back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio, and thank you all for staying tuned for the second hour of the show. Isn't this just interesting, all of these insights into the pyramids that I don't think anybody would... It's not that you wouldn't think of it, but it's just, I don't know, I think it's taking it to a much deeper level. But don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And if you want to hear old episodes of the show, you can get that information at the Just Energy Radio webpage. That's www.justenergyradio.com. Or we've been posting the episodes on YouTube, and you can go to our channel, which is Just Energy Radio. Yes, Just Energy Radio. Or you can become our Facebook fans at our Facebook page, Just Energy Radio. Hey, it's Just Energy Radio. Anyway, let's get Carmen back on the air and continue our conversation about pyramids and Egypt and all of this really interesting stuff. Hey, Carmen, you still there?
Yes.
So there's lots of really good comments in the chat room. They're finding you very interesting, as I do. Before we went to break, you kind of made a side comment about a trip to Egypt. Is this like a tour trip thing, or is this you going on an investigation trip to Egypt?
Oh, no. I've done that this year already. No, it's December 8th to 22nd. It's Magic Egypt 12-12-12. And we'll be in the Great Pyramid for 12/12, and then we'll be at the Crystal Altar of Abu Ghraib for December 21st. We're also on keynote for joining up with a 2-day 2012 Great Convergence, where we'll do seminars in the hotel room on the 20th and explain all these galactic alignments and everything I've been talking about here with all the graphics and whatnot. And then on the 21st at night, at 7 o'clock, they're putting up a Bedouin tent on the plateau, and we're inviting other groups who will already be in Egypt, and they can join us, and then we'll do a celebration of being into the new cycle.
Not that I want to plug somebody else's show, but are you hooked up with Carrie Cassidy at all?
No, well, she was on one of the trips.
Because I think she was at a conference, and I was talking to her peeps a lot, and they were talking about, I think she's going to be in Egypt for 12/21 and doing a bunch of stuff too.
She's hooked up with Michael Tellinger and Hugh Newman, and they're doing their own tour. She's been on one of my tours, and when we were in the pyramid for 11/11, Hugh Newman joined us, and maybe it was 10/10. Maybe that's where they met, actually. I get mixed up who's on which trip. But no, we're on a separate trip, and 5-star all the way, Nile cruise, the whole thing, and pretty much everything we're allowed to see from the Pyramid Code is we're including on the trip. But this time we've got permits to go into the Serapeum, which Chris Dunn talks a lot about, where there's all the evidence of high-level technology with the 20-ton sarcophagi and 5-ton lids at Saqqara, the Serapeum, which has been closed to the public since 1996, and we've got permits to go in.
How do you manage that? It seems like you get to go to all these secret places that nobody gets to touch.
It's magic. I don't know.
We like magic.
Well, in fact, this time I've been offered an Egyptian guide card. I've never heard of any North American get one. And for some reason, they've decided to give me one. So that is quite astonishing as well. Now, the Pyramid Code's been on national TV, translated into Arabic in Egypt as well. Like, it's been on in 30 countries, but not in Canada, which is astonishing. So.
Well, I don't know. Has it been on in the U.S.? Because I know it's something that I would have watched on TV, but I don't recall it being on TV.
It's been on Documentary Channel, and then they renewed it again. But, you know, anything that's talking about the empowerment of humans seems to not really want to sell well to TV here. But certainly in Korea and, you know, Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic and, you know, places all over the world, they do want it. So it's obvious to me that there's a certain amount of repression that, you know, people aren't supposed to be empowered. They're supposed to be disempowered.
And we're the land of the free. One of the places I was on your website this morning that I wanted to talk about was your... Oh, and I have to get your little question paper. you had some pictures about a site in the Western Desert that you had been to in Egypt. And where is this place? What is this place? How did you find it? I have so many questions because I was just kind of blown away by the pictures.
As I was. And so the whole thing started with someone sending me one of these pictures, and I won't say who, but somebody associated with science, let's say, and they asked me if I could put together an expedition to go in the Western Desert and find this site. Well, the Western Desert's the size of Texas. It's 770,000 square kilometers. And I said, well, I need to know maybe what quadrant or a general vicinity. You don't have to pinpoint the coordinates because, it's either a 2-day expedition or a 5-day expedition out on the open desert, and you've got to bring gas and, water and mechanics and car parts and jeeps and stuff to survive and, get permits. And you have to know where you're going because the Egyptian government doesn't allow you to just go into these military zones where there are leftover landmines from the wars and whatnot that they didn't clear up. They just closed the zone, and that's where one of these places ended up being located. Anyway, so I was working on a pitch for a news series called The Psychic Archaeologist, and so I had amassed a team, and Dr. Erin Nell was on that team. And, so as I said, I'm psychic, but I also had somebody who considered herself to be an advanced psychic, and we were a team that could get the permits through Erin and then get out there because she's an American married to an Egyptian man, and she's worked on many, many digs, and she's got ways in and a desert camping company. And so I started investigating the site, and I went on Google Earth and measured and this sort of thing. And this person said, I'm not telling you where it is, and if she's so psychic, why doesn't she find it herself? Well, this is literally a needle in a haystack, and if you go on Google Earth, the entire Western Desert is white. There isn't a road, there's no village, it's white. It's just desert, period, right? And so I thought, well, there's a challenge. Let's see. So I sat down at the computer, and I started to fish around and look at the satellite images and narrow down. Anyway, whatever, long and short of it is, I found it.
Okay, so how long? 20 minutes? No.
Yeah, it took me about 20 minutes to find it, literally.
Oh, I had a psychic moment on you.
Well, and then when I found it, I got all excited and contacted the team. I was with my morning coffee. The psychic was in Chicago having lunch, and Erin was in Egypt having dinner, so we were in 3 time zones. And I went, I found it. So they had to load Google Earth, and I gave them the coordinates and all that. And then, there's a second site with Vesica Pisces and these airplane things that looked in it. Anyway, I'm like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to find the other site? And I'm like, hold on, just a minute. I just felt this energy coming over me. Next thing I knew, my hand was moving along, and I found the other site. So don't ask me how any of this happens, but never talk to the other guy again. But the picture that you see showed up on Philip Coppen's Facebook page, and I had disclosed to him because I'm working with him. And he said, do you want me to take it off? I said, yes, but I felt a real urgency that we needed to get up and go. And the other thing is that when I finally found the coordinates, I was able to measure, using Google Earth, the lengths of the sides. And so these walls were 30 feet wide, thick, and 1,378 feet long. And then there was a circle in the middle with a cross and something that looked like the top of an obelisk or a pyramid or who knows what. But the original person that sent me the picture said it could possibly have ties to Atlantis, and which is pretty compelling, and that was a theory, I suppose. Anyway, so because the site was so big, if we were on the ground, we would, just like the Nazca lines, if you walk the Nazca lines in Peru, in Ica, Peru, you don't see them, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're on top of them, and if you're a mile up in the air, you can see the shapes. And so I thought, well, there's no way. I was leading the expedition and had to arrange for, camp film crew and the whole thing, because it would have been an episode of The Psychic Archaeologist. So we arranged to bring in a balloon and to do desert camping and to bring in the crew, and that's where I invited Dr. Konstantin Korokov to come bring the measurement equipment so we could have the energetic frequencies and how it affected people, so we could ascertain if it indeed was ancient or what it was, because, you can't bend facts to meet your hypothesis. And so off we went, and it was quite instantaneous because I was afraid somebody else was going to find it first. So I didn't even tell my friends I was leaving, and it's like, you were gone? You went to Egypt already? What? So from one day to the next, we bought tickets and went.
And just take a little pause right there. So these are like the first pictures of this site? Like no one really knew about it at all?
Nope.
Wow. Even more exciting. Okay,
yep.
Continue.
And it was... Anyway, so, we hooked up with the balloon crew, and they had the basket in the back of a truck, and we camped, and we were all ready to go for a sunset balloon ride the next morning, and off we went. And then we lost the balloon crew. We couldn't find them. And so we're driving up and down the road, and I'm like, oh, my God, this is just a gong show. And then we hooked up with them again, and we found them, but we were supposed to fly at sunrise, because as it gets warmer, the temperature inversion up and down, it makes it dangerous to land. It makes it really impossible to control. And so as many as there are successful flights, balloon ride flights in Egypt, they're all right in the early morning. And so the crew was in a Jeep. We were all in four-wheel drives, but the balloon was in just a trailer with a one-wheel drive vehicle. So it would drive 10 feet and get stuck. So we'd all get out and pull it or push it, and it would get out. And we'd drive 10 more feet, and it would get stuck. So the pilot for the balloon was like, either we cancel the whole expedition or we fly from here. And I go, but we're not there yet. You go up, but you're not there. And so we were working with the GPS and trying to figure it all out. And then I did some instant calculations in my head to try to figure out, like, how far we could see and how far we could travel in a single ride, because I've done a lot of balloon rides over the Nile and over the temples and the Valley of the Kings and all of that. So he had a little balloon, and he put it on the helium tank, and the balloon flew in a different direction, and we needed to go in another direction. And I thought, well, after all this, and Spirit dragging me here and having us all ready and all the money that I'm spending to do this, surely to God we can hold the balloon on the right track. Okay? So this is me and whoever my guides are. So sure enough, we went up, we went straight in a straight line, and I bought a new professional HD video camera that had 22 times optical range. And so way off in the distance, I see a pyramid. Is that a pyramid? Yes, it's a pyramid, said the cameraman who was looking through the lens. And so we approached, and then, to the north of it was not one Vesica Pisces with an airplane, but 9, and they were arranged on the Tree of Life, and we had ascertained that it was actually 1 degree off the longitudinal meridian of the Great Pyramid, where this site was. And so I thought, oh my God, this is can't happen by chance, and it looked pretty good. And so, we could see the walls, we could see the trapezoid shape and the center as we were flying over, and then bounce, really dangerous landing, because it was, by this point, about 11 o'clock in the morning when we had left for this at 4. So, how expeditions are, everything takes longer. And we started looking around, and then we walked over, and the first time my eyes looked at the walls, I knew right away that this was falling apart, but it looked like something that we had built that would last 30 years, not 30,000, if you know what I mean, or 3,000. And then there were all these potholes, and then we thought we were in a landmine area. That's the other thing, is that we're roaming around. We thought there were landmines everywhere, and there are. There's definitely landmines in that area, but there were all these bombs and unexploded bombs, little ones, like there's pictures of it on the website. Like, I don't know, 10 inches long sort of thing. And the pyramid was really small, but it was really kind of falling apart. And there were little bomb marks on that. So we're walking around thinking, what is this? And we realized that it was an Air Force target. Like, how stupid are we? Anyways, I'm using your word. And so we did the energetic frequency, and there's 2 different measurements. You get the frequency of a place, but then you get whether it's stable or chaotic. And everything in Egypt, for all the measurements we've done around the world, is stronger even in an apartment in Cairo than it is in, a temple at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, for example, because the energetic frequency of Egypt is very, very strong. And that's why I'm addicted to going there, because it's palpable to me, and I always feel better there. Anyway, so when we looked at the stability, it was completely unstable. So to me, the good news and what I learned from that spot was that if we damage the Earth, the earth contains and feels the memory. And if you're dropping bombs on this thing 30 years later, it still knows, which I think is fascinating, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, full stop, so off we went, and now we have and I still think it's an interesting story, and it's an adventure, and it didn't look like there was anything ancient, though I did channel some material, and it seems to me that there was something else. If it wasn't there, then it was somewhere else, and it may be buried in the sand, because, of course, it's open desert, and who knows in thousands of years how much can get buried. But the interesting twist on it was that the pyramid study, using the same equipment, led me to meet Valery Uvarov, and his project with that one pyramid is the project for the new Atlantis. And when he was showing me the pictures of the plans, I was like, this is the new Atlantis. And so in some strange way, the big story fits together, and now there's new pyramids that are being built, and this structure will have the center pyramid, which is complete, and a ring around it with the canals, just like they had in Atlantis, and the grass and the trees, 4 pyramids, and then another round circle with canals and everything else, and 4 more pyramids. And that's another story, but it's quite an astonishing project. And so one way or another, it all fits together, and we went and we found it, and we know we can do that sort of thing. And so sure enough, now all kinds of people are looking around on Google Earth and saying, oh, this looks like pyramids. No, this looks like the Earth. If it's a pyramid, you can tell. It's, you know what I mean? Like the Google Earth is pretty good now. It's like the resolution isn't perfect, but it's quite fine. And so people are saying they're making discoveries of, new sites in Egypt, but they never left their living room and their computer to go check to see if it's real or not.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask kind of a dumb question. So what you found there was not old?
Nope.
So why did they tell you to go there, or why did that informant provide you with that information? Were they just unaware that it was not old?
Yes, I think they didn't know, and they certainly didn't know how to navigate into Egypt and how to get permits and how to be safe and do it. And anybody can go on Google Earth and find anything and say anything they want. And I'm seeing that over and over again, how much misinformation is, and there is, and how few people know how to decipher and slice through it. So at least with a scientific method and real equipment and, a real crew. I mean, it's still an adventure. I mean, it was so exciting that we even found it, because it really was a needle in a haystack. And, you can't bend science, as I say. You can't say, I think it's ancient, therefore it's ancient. And that's fine. All scientific experiments have to have the results they have. And all too often in the past, the scientists find what they want to find. Like the pharmaceutical companies run the tests on the drugs, and then they find what they want to find. And if the data doesn't show what they want, they throw it out. And that's not real science.
Well, see, now I'm kind of bummed. I had some questions, because when I was looking at the pictures, the circles were just perfect. And it's not that the ancients couldn't have made these perfect circles. It wasn't about their ability to have that level of craftsmanship. But the part that just kind of caught my attention was that they really didn't look like they were buried. And if they had been out there for that long a period of time, that they either would have been deeper under the dirt, or the sand or whatever would have been more uneven in its distribution over it?
Well, and again, though, you can't tell until you go look. So if you look at the pictures, you can see us walking around, and you can see that the walls are probably up below our knees, like they're like a foot high, but they're 30 feet wide. So from straight over the top, they look like these huge walls. And, they could have been 30 feet high. There's no way to be able to look at that. Even though you can do a side view on Google Earth, you're making it up, constructing it out of nothing, because the satellite shot is directly from above. So you can't tell how high things are, but you can tell how wide things are. And so they were that was basically X marks the spot, drop your bomb here and see if you hit. And so if you look up close, you'll see that there's these broken pieces of blue pottery that was kind of like when they do skeet shooting and the pottery breaks apart. And it's almost like a rubber road that it was all artificial materials, and when the heat, was on it, it kind of smelt like, asphalt on a road. And so it was obvious that it was not ancient. It was in the middle of nowhere. And so, it would make a perfect thing for the Air Force to just fly along and, orient new pilots to coordinates and then drop a bomb. Now, the fact that anybody practices that and the fact that anybody's killing anybody is just beyond me. So that's the attitude in my voice here. It's like, how stupid are we to just go drop things on the planet and then hurt it and have her bruise, the planet herself. So anyway.
But just think, in 5,000 years, it'll be some ritualistic site.
Or be just deteriorated and back to sand. It won't last, which is, to me, it shows that we don't know how to build anything. It can't even last 30 years. How are we going to build things that last 5,000? We just don't have the headset, the technology, or anything that the ancients did. And we're looking at them like incredulously, like they're kind of infantile, and why are they worshiping animals, and everything that we were taught in school about Egypt, and they just haven't got a clue what they were doing with their archetypal energies and earth energies and all of that. So we're coming around to the part where we can crack the code.
They didn't have indoor plumbing, and that's what it's all about.
Well, they had it in Knossos on Crete and in the Minoan culture at the same time as the 12th dynasty of Egypt. There's a lot of we're thinking that's cavemen in those times. So everything's being rewritten. The history books are just repetitive stuff that supports the patriarchy, and the patriarchy's agenda is to erase evidence of everything other than itself. But there's some things that you still can't erase. And so, you know what? It's too late. We're figuring it out.
In your travels in different countries, do you find more of an openness in certain countries? It sounds like in Russia there's more of an openness to sharing information about these discoveries and about new information that is coming out about the archaeological finds, the scientific finds, than we find in, I'll say the United States. I don't know how it is in Canada.
Absolutely. I mean, what goes on in educational institutions and in scientific laboratories in other countries is outstanding. And pretty much, even the safety level, like all this stuff about, terrorists and all that stuff, the only place I feel unsafe ever, in all these travels to 53 countries, and Egypt counts as one, and I've been there 27 times, is the States. It's the only scary place. It's the only place that, like everything's hidden and you're not supposed to know this stuff, and if you know too much, you're afraid that they're going to come and get you. The rest of the world is going on without that. And there's plenty of science and plenty of openness and plenty of beautiful, educated, graceful people who are willing to share, and disclosure of UFOs. This man, Valery Uvarov, is the UFO consultant to the Supreme Council of the government, this and that. I don't know the exact title because I keep forgetting because it's 2 lines long. And everybody knows that UFOs exist. Putin has had UFO experiences. They're into healing work. They're into anything that makes them open up and become more conscious. The government leaders are. So when I start talking, the Nazi and the communists are hiding behind there, and you just didn't see them, and they're going to come and get you. And I'm telling you, the rest of the world doesn't think like that. And I've seen it firsthand. I've really been around.
Just amazing, because when you're in this seat, it just seems like they're all the bad people. That's the spin.
St. Petersburg is the most gorgeous city. It's got the oldest, biggest museum, except for aside from the Smithsonian. St. Petersburg in Russia, you should see this place. You should see the artifacts in there, undamaged, gorgeous. I was escorted to the library. I got to see these books that 3 feet by 2 feet by 4 inches thick that Napoleon's men had painted plates from Egypt, and I was able to photograph them, and they escorted me through to the Egyptian collection there, and I got to see ancient fabric, and I'm telling you, they got it together. The buildings and the architecture were beautiful. The women were dressed in these gorgeous summer dresses with matching shoes and purses, and I'm like, where am I? There were people from 17 countries at this conference. There were over 40 speakers in this 3-day Congress, and I was one of the 6 keynotes on the first day that got more time than the others and stuff. How that happened, I don't know either. But it's like nobody from the States. People from Mongolia, from Colombia, Venezuela, all over the world. But nobody from the States. You explain that to me. In fact, I had a colleague who wanted to come with me, and she looked up flights, and she says, it's just too difficult to go from here. The flights are $3,500. Yeah, they don't want you going there. And everybody's telling you not to go to Egypt. Every single time I get a plane ticket for Egypt, somebody tells me I should be afraid. I get there, it's like the most peaceful, honest to God, like this stuff, the way the propaganda's coming down, it just isn't true. And the footage that they show on CNN, that's not even Egypt they're showing. The footage is all orange and greeny from 20 years ago, and it's probably somewhere like Saudi because the people don't dress like that. But they put it on the TV, and everybody knows that we're being lied to. But you don't quite put it together, and everybody, I don't want you to go there. No, you can't go there. And the rest, and all the secrets are there. Well, the cat's out of the bag.
How are things now that Zahi's not there anymore? Has it changed? Is it still status quo kind of thing?
Well, there's still rules, and you still have to have permits, and the Department of Antiquities, the Supreme Council of Antiquities, is still in charge. And I've been getting permits all along, and I've got permits now, and they're offering me a guide card. And to me, it seemed a little bit easier and more open. I think that anybody who worked for the Department of Antiquities is relieved that he's gone. He definitely ruled with an iron fist, and they all had fear. I've been there twice since the revolution. I think things are improving. I think people are a lot happier. They were very energized about that there was a change. We don't know if the government's not going to just be more of the same because the system, we didn't change the system. They just changed the leader, but I think it's a lot better, to tell you the truth.
That's good. I mean, because it just seemed like, and I have Robert Brval coming on the show. He has a new book about, all the stuff that's being hidden from us that's coming out of Egypt, and I'm not quite sure what his angle is, if it's, like the United States government hiding it from us, or if it's the Egyptian government hiding it from us. But do you think that they're hiding stuff?
Well, I know Robert, and he hooked up with an Egyptian person who had an inside track to the government and the Council of Antiquities, and he was born in Egypt, in Alexandria, and his family was kind of kicked out during the revolution during 1954, whatever you called that. And so he speaks fluent Arabic, and so he can get around and ask some questions. And he told me personally that his premise with this is 25 years of corruption with Zahi. That's the basis of the book. And there are stories of whole container loads that they say were artifacts from Cal Al-Khalili Market, which is the largest market on the continent and oldest of Africa. And they were real artifacts. And I've seen all kinds of things, like the Hatshepsut. There were 28 statues of Pharaoh Queen Hatshepsut buried at her temple, and when the American team came to excavate in the 20s, they found all the pieces. They were all broken, but all the pieces were there because they just took all her statues and dumped them into a pit. Then these were restored, and they were sent around the world. Well, in March of 2009, I believe, not maybe 10, it was at the Metropolitan Museum. I was flying through there on my way to Egypt, and all 28 statues were going to be together again. And so I got to be there with them by myself. Like, it's funny, I've got this thing. I just went to Berlin to see Nefertiti, too, and everybody leaves the room when I walk in, and they're finished. It's just the timing, but I get to be alone with the artifacts, and nothing pleases me
How
more.
cool.
Even the security guys left the room to go have a little break because, there's just one person in there. We don't have to worry about her. You're right. You don't have to worry about me. So my point is that when that exhibit ended, the statues never went back to the Cairo Museum. From the first time I was in the Cairo Museum in 1977 till now, I'm going to say something first. It used to be that if you spent 1 minute at every exhibit, you'd be in there for 9 months. Half of it is missing. Where is it? And there's people who say, he has enough money from what? From he doesn't need to sell artifacts. Yeah. Well, we don't know who's selling. We don't know who's selling what and where the money's going. But there's certainly not. And they said they were going to build a new museum near the plateau, just off the Alexandria Road. And they moved the statue of Ramses. It cost $2 million, big fanfare, blah, blah, blah. And they erected a statue of Mubarak in front of the train station and said, that statue is still sitting in crates. They haven't broke ground. And they're saying that the artifacts are going to the new museum. Well, if you're not on the ground in Egypt and you haven't been to the museum N times, right, like 50, 60, 70 times, and studied with somebody in there, one wing at a time, you don't know what's missing. They count on people being ignorant. And even when we were filming, they were doing these pencil log books of all the artifacts that were in there. And then they rip whole cases off the wall. and take things. They close whole rooms in the museum. And you walk around and there's things in plastic. I've got this routine where I go through and I, have my talk when I have a group with the little, microphones, and the person has headphones, and then walk through. It's gone. Whoop, it's gone. Whoop, it's gone. Oh, here's something I talk about. Oh, this one's in plastic. They're just hauling stuff out of there like a warehouse. It's disgusting. And I think that Robert Bauval has got his finger on the pulse of that, and he's got insider tracks, and his fluent Arabic has put together a story of what they did in these 25 years of corruption.
Well, now we just gave a great preview for what that's going to be about. That sounds exciting, full of intrigue.
Well, it's intrigue, but it's also, there's enough Egyptian artifacts that they're all over the world, and, people who won't go to Egypt will see them in a museum. But in order for me to do my research, I've had to go, to London, to the British Museum, to the Metropolitan Museum, the Brooklyn Museum in New York, to Berlin, to the Louvre, to who knows where else. There's stuff in Taiwan. There's stuff all over the world.
And that's only the stuff they put out or will let you access.
Exactly, and the most recent one was the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. So the Louvre has all the musical instruments. Nowhere else in the world. There's one teeny little flute that was also wrapped in plastic that was on its way out of the National Museum in Egypt. But musical instruments, they're nowhere. The little finger cymbals that the belly dancers wore, and they were the temple dancers, and, harps and drums and all these different instruments, all at the Louvre. Fabric, where do you see fabric? You don't see any fabric anywhere. All at the Hermitage. So when they were making their deals to, divvy up stuff, like the stuff from Amarna, they had a bunch of stuff from the temple of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and they packaged it all up, and somehow the Germans ended up with the bust of Nefertiti because they didn't call attention to the fact that it was the most exquisite, and it ended up in Berlin. And you can't believe what's in Berlin, all these tapestries from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It just goes on and on. So I've had to go all over the world to see these things. It's incredible, really. Don't you think?
Well, anyway, the King Tut exhibit had come to Dallas, and we were there.
No, that's fake. The King Tut exhibit has never left Egypt. They made a complete artifact replica that looks pretty good, but it doesn't have the energy, and it's not the real one. No. When people see the King Tut exhibit, they don't realize they're seeing a replica. Well,
this was my experience. Actually, we didn't even try to get tickets until fairly close to the opening, and people were like, yeah, you aren't going to get a ticket, brr, 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 brr. And I went online to go find a ticket, and we got tickets for the first group opening day at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, how perfect. And but anyway, I'm glad that you said that. We were kind of unimpressed. They had a lot of stuff that really didn't look like King Tut's. They were from different periods, different times, kind of leading up to what was supposedly King Tut's. And then they had like a few things, some gold stuff that may or may not have been his, who knows. And it was interesting. We spent like 3 hours in what probably should have been like a 20-minute tour, walking through the whole thing and pointing and touching not touching anything, but trying to. And we were a little underwhelmed. And the few pieces
now I'm going to tell you what.
But the few pieces that looked like they could have been something, I don't know. I just thought that I would feel more. So I'm glad that you made that comment.
Yeah, you didn't feel anything because it's fake. Like somebody in Washington, just across the river, made a new Stonehenge, and I went there, and it's absolutely perfect, and it's made out of cement. You don't feel anything because it's fake. It's not the real thing. Even all the broken down Stonehenge, I was just there in May, and it's got energy because it's real. Okay, so first of all, the other thing, there's two things I want to say. One is when you said that there's stuff that you haven't seen. Valery Uberov escorted me to the Hermitage, and he said, well, there's crates downstairs in the basement of the museum that have 100 years old. 100 years they've been sitting there of Egyptian artifacts they never opened. And I said, what's that, politics, laziness? He says, I think laziness. And he's like, when are you coming back? Because I'm working on a project with him. And I said, when you get somebody to open those crates, I'll be standing here with a camera. He says, okay, I'll make a few phone calls. It's like, okay, I'll be here. And the other thing is about the King Tut stuff. Like, even the story of King Tut himself. Like, I watched them with all this DNA stuff, and I studied archaeology and mitochondrial DNA and how they do the lines and everything. And then they closed all the labs, and they apparently put a lab in the basement of the museum in Egypt, and they were going to do this stuff. And I said, they're going to try to prove that Akhenaten was his father. Akhenaten was not his father. I have very strong past life memories of that whole time and the Amun priesthood and how they were, plotting, and how Akhenaten and Nefertiti said, this is religion, you're getting rich off this is not spirituality, we're closing the temples, we're starting over, we're going to this place. And they raised Tut in preparation so that he could be, he started at Akhenaten, and then they changed it to Amun, because the Amun priesthood, we still say Amen. I refuse to say Amen, because that's the Amun priesthood. That was the dark of the cycles of Egypt, and it's also the Amun cycle again that's coming to an end now. It's like I'm telling you, because there's many, many cycles, and that's one of them. But there were a bunch of mummies in a cache, and they needed a place to bury him quick, because they killed him. When they found out that he was keeping the Aten energy going, they killed him. And Zahi's like, no, it was an accident. Oh, that hole in his head, don't worry about it. And then they're doing all this, he's the son of Akhenaten, which makes him white, and there's all these political things. And apparently, Zahi himself doesn't even believe it. But I ended up on February 17th, 2009, I think, 10. I don't get my dates right because it's just a blur of trips to Egypt. But at the press conference where Zahi announced the results of this DNA testing, because they've been dicking around with it, and they've been on National Geographic, they show these things of Akhenaten's mummy, and it's a skeleton. They're never going to find Akhenaten from the story of how he ended up passing, or Nefertiti. Anyway, so I'm listening to this whole thing in Arabic going, is he saying what I think he's saying? Yeah, sure enough, and then the whole thing was in English. But I showed up. I found out from my contacts where this press conference was going to be, and because I've done so much research and gotten so many permits from the curator's office of the National Museum, I just went to the curator's office, and the secretary saw me, and she told all the guards to let me in. I don't know how it happens either. I mean, I didn't do anything to try to get into the library. At the Hermitage, I didn't even know there was a library. So, I've been really lucky. So the answer to the question of how do I get into all these places is, honestly, I don't know.
Good answer. I'm trying to think of where I want to go. So who do you think was King Tut's, not that it really matters, was King Tut's father? Actually, I have a better question. So do you think Akhenaten actually looked the way that he's depicted in...
Yes. Funny-shaped hat covers funny-shaped head. Yes.
Funny-shaped body.
Yes, because they were starseed. And the daughters, they had 6 daughters. It was an anomaly happening. And I went to Amarna, and I had all this past life stuff going on, and oh, my God, such a powerful experience. And it was like the birthing chambers were always full of blood, like the boy babies weren't living. There was some genetic anomaly going on, which is why Nefertiti Akhenaten had 6 daughters and no boys. And so they were starseed, they were different, they were spiritual, and even Akhenaten's father didn't look like him. But in the same dynasty, Queen Hatshepsut said that her father shape-shifted, and a star being came into her father's body that impregnated her mother, so she was half starseed. And the whole story is on the Temple of Dir el-Bahri, the Temple of Queen Hatshepsut, in the Valley of the Kings. And so if you look at the family trees from the 18th dynasty, you're going to find a lot of discrepancy between them. They all conflict, which is because either people repeat somebody else's mistakes or they guess because they don't have a way. And that's why when you're talking about star systems in Egypt, unless you go look at Starry Night Pro, you're guessing. And so, she is the great-great-great-grandmother of Akhenaten. And so the starseed lineage started, and there was something really special. Nobody knows really who Nefertiti was or where she came from. And so there was something special. And, so there was this golden age energy that was happening a long, long time ago where they had the true spirituality, and every once in a while it percolated up. So the beginning of dynastic Egypt was the patriarchal beginning. And then it became warring and all that stuff and, male-oriented and all that. But every once in a while something percolated up, and the 18th dynasty in particular. So the reign of Queen Hatshepsut and later Nefertiti and Akhenaten and Tut, and they're, the pharaohs of the sun, and they were remembering the old stuff. So it's almost like a snapshot window. It didn't last very long. The Amun priesthood came, took over, poisoned one of their daughters, and took over again. And chopped them up into pieces. Nefertiti walked out of there. They're never finding their bodies. I'll guarantee it. I'll I'm certain of that only from my own personal conviction. But we'll wait and see 20 years if they ever find them. But they keep claiming to find them. And so there's so much misinformation. So if you're casually following Egyptology, you'll be really confused. Go ahead.
But if you look at the customs in Egypt, if you weren't mummified, you just went bye-bye. You didn't have a chance at the afterlife, so it wouldn't make sense that they would mummify them because they were thought of as outcasts. Or is it not true that that's the whole deal with them, and that's why they got rid of Amarna and took that city apart?
Why do you think they took the city apart?
No, is that, I mean, what I've been led to believe, and maybe what I have heard and read is incorrect, was that, they had started up their whole dynasty thing with the belief in the one God, and they were taken out. And they destroyed the city. And so my comment is, if they were taken out, then why would they mummify them? Because that would just kind of further disgrace them because now they could never reach immortality.
I see. Well, and then the tombs of Akhenaten and Nefertiti were definitely at Amarna, and then, of course, it became Horemheb, who was the army general, and Ai, who was the vizier, and they weren't even royal family. And so now the tombs say Tomb of Ai and stuff. So they really did come and flatten it. And they were having Tut pose as someone who would be of the Amun, who would kind of keep the old beliefs alive. And when they knocked him off, they had a cache of several mummies, and they took them out, and they took all the furniture from Amarna that they could, and they threw it in there like a warehouse, and that's what we found. That's what the King Tut find is. And so it wasn't his stuff. When I first saw it, I thought, this wasn't his stuff. I'm looking at it all almost like recognizing it. And so that's been the sham. And they took over again so that they could make money from the people and charge people half their harvest for taxes at the temple, and you'd have to pay for your salvation and all that stuff. And that's what led to the idea of Christianity and Catholicism, and they were copying the Isis, Osiris, Horus, and the Jesus, Mary, Joseph thing, and so they did not change it to one God. Mut and Isis and all of them, they're there. Hathor. This is a patriarchal superimposition over what really happened at Amarna to promote Catholicism and then denigrate anything that's different than that with all these twisty things. Like, they use it forwards and backwards. Like, it's such a mess in terms of how they present it. They say that Akhenaten was crazy and he was deformed and, is white. He had feminine consciousness. And, we're not allowed to have that in patriarchal ways of being and thinking. And Egyptology was, like Darwinism and Freud and all these things that were all about male domination and all of that. And so they've taken something that was completely sacred, completely pure, starting over again and resetting against the corruption. And they painted black all over the top of it.
Well, why would I don't understand why they would do that.
In order to promote patriarchal ways of being and thinking. Because nobody understood the purity and the golden age and magic and truth and living in harmony. I mean, what else is there to do, for one thing? But certainly our society, let's go kill the whales and ruin the earth and GMO and chemtrails, give everybody cancer. Come on, we're not in the same state of consciousness as they were. But the patriarchs were taking over. And they did, and they've continued to.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a kind of out-there question, but you read my book, so maybe it won't be so far out there. I mean, do you believe that, ancient aliens were here and influenced the direction that mankind took?
Well, I don't think of it that way as somebody in a spaceship with almond eyes and a little body coming along to say, take me to your leader, I'm going to show you what to do. But I do think the way people channel the ascended masters and commune with disincarnate beings that are pure, and I'm not talking ghosts that are on the lower astrals, but I'm talking the super wise teachers from other planets, perhaps, that they could channel them, that they could access information. And people are doing that now. And, so there's the Pleiadian Agenda and all the Barbara Marciniak books and Barbara Hand-Clow and all of that from before. And I think that was a similar situation with the ancient Egyptians that they were able to commune with higher level beings. They probably even bilocated and teleported to other planets. And so it's not that extraterrestrials were different that came down to teach us and save us. I'm saying us as if we were there. It's more that we are the starseeds, and we came with our knowledge and communed with our ancestors. So it's not extraterrestrials outside of us. It's almost interterrestrials that starseed. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I mean, because I feel like, whether or not, whose theory is right or not, doesn't, it's not about the theory, that there was a lot more purity when you go really far back, and by the time you hit dynastic Egypt, they were so stuck in the dogma and the whole meaning and the deepness of what was originally there was long gone, and there was just faint memories of it.
That's right. And then it was distorted and distorted and distorted. So we've had 13,000 years of deterioration. But I'm just thinking about something else. We all think we have to get in a car and drive somewhere, or get on a bus or on a vehicle of some kind to go somewhere, right? And extraterrestrials are, multidimensional beings that can pop in and out, that can change directions, that can be there and disappear, right? And they can erase our memories, and they can pop into our heads, and you know what I mean? Like they're in a different dimension. But we're expecting them to show up in little cars, their little space cars that fly around, and their little bodies and their little suits, to show themselves so that we know they're real and they're really extraterrestrial because their vehicles don't look like ours. Like, it's just not how it works. And this is how, though, we've gotten all mixed up, and if you can't see it, it's not there, is one of the premises of the patriarchy. And so we're even mixed up as we solve it.
Well, and I've asked the question before, actually it might have been to Barbara Han Clow. It's like, well, if they can get into our head, and we can channel their information, one, is there a two-way conversation going on, or are we getting into somebody else's head where they might think we're gods, scary as that may be, as stupid as we are?
Well,
I joke about people that channel because, they might be channeling Fred the janitor, and not some smart alien being from another dimension.
Well, and that's another trick of the patriarchy. I mean, outlaw reincarnation, say that if you believe in magic or any energy from the other side, we're going to kill you and torture you first and give you cellular memories so that you'll never touch tarot cards again and all of that. And then anything that's invisible, any being, not allowed to talk about. I was on Coast to Coast on Monday night, and George didn't want to talk about everything we're talking about. He wanted to talk about pyramids for an hour, angels for 2 hours. So all these people are calling in like, well, how do you know if it's a good angel or a bad angel or a demon or a this or... We don't know how to have that conversation. So it's actually quite an interesting interview if you get a chance to listen to it because, it's explaining along these lines about what these different beings are. But, so you slam the door. You're not allowed talking about that. You're not allowed thinking about this. You're not allowed using these oracles. And so then people are like, well, maybe the extraterrestrials had something to do with all this stuff we can't understand. I mean, it's a natural conclusion. But it's the highest level beings that commune for the highest level of consciousness and the highest technology and the highest examples of how to live well. And that's all the ancient Egyptians were doing. They were giving us examples of how to live well. And they had a good time. They had a really good time. And they were super healthy and super pure. And they're flipping in and out of dimensions. Well, get used to it because that's where we're going, I think.
Do you think with the technology, and I'm thinking more about the electronic technology, the EMFs that are in our society and, in the world today, that we'll actually be able to do that? Or do you think that it might actually inhibit our ability to pop in and out? No.
We're doing. Some of us are doing it. I mean, I've done a lot of hours on the radio, and I haven't talked about all of it. I mean, there's certainly, ways to leave our body, bilocate. I think that why are people so fascinated with Star Trek? Even the old Star Trek. Beam me up, Scotty, and it's like it makes sense to us so we can dematerialize and rematerialize. Absolutely. These are the abilities. Look at shows like Heroes. One of them's flying. One of them's hands are turning to fire. But actually, the ancient initiates were able to do all of it. Like you didn't get one ability. Once you understood the transmutation of the atom, you did them all. Everything was telepathic. Everything was manifestation, alchemy, things, objects popping in and out of dimensions. It's real. It's real to me. Believe me, it's real to me. But I've been exposed to a lot of this material, and I've been able to explore and go sit in the places where they did it and dedicate my life to figuring it out. And have the experience. If you build enough of a charge inside your body, you're able to do that. And it's very real to me.
Well, and I don't doubt it, and I believe it too. I mean, I definitely believe we have the power to manifest and astral travel and do all of this stuff. It just seems like, all right, let me think about what I want to say for a second. Well, there's a lot of different ways I could go. It just seems like, to me, you can find a more grounded space, when you're in the woods, or I could see, or in a sacred site. It has a different energy. There's usually that vortex around it that just kind of puts you in an energetic place. And short of people's cell phones, well, and maybe surveillance cameras, there's not that, there's not a computer in front of your face. There's not the TV in front of your face, giving you the static. So,
okay,
anyway.
So what did you just say? You said in the woods or at a sacred spot. What's there? Being able to take your feet and connect to the sacred and the true, which is the planet, which is natural. What's the opposite? The TV, the computer, the cell phone. Not natural. Inorganic. Trickery. Okay? And so either we're doing things that connect us to natural cycles, which is what the Egyptians were all about, or we're unconnecting ourselves from all of that and becoming synthetic. And the more that we're synthetic, the more all of that stuff is a mystery and fake. And the more we're connected, the more we realize that we're communing with planet Earth, that she's alive, that she has faith in us, and that it's a co-creation. The other thing is this artificial old guy in the sky with a lightning bolt that's going to strike you down if you don't have faith in him. But what did he do, to deserve that faith? Like it's all fabricated. It's fabricated religion, fabricated stories, fabricated fabric, fabricated people, fabricated thinking. The rest of it, you have peace with yourself and go lie down on the earth and have your own insights. That's different.
Carmen, I just looked at the clock and we have like a minute and a half before the music's going to come back up. So any new projects, any speaking engagements, what's coming up for you in the next, months, X months?
I'll be at CPAC, the Conference on Procession and Ancient Knowledge in Palm Springs, Walter Crittenden's talk, and I'll be filming there doing interviews as well as speaking at it. I'm working on a book on the deciphering of the sealing of the Temple of Dendera with William Henry called Awakening the Sacred Feminine, Dendera Decoded. And the Magic Egypt trip is coming up, and I'm working on this project for the new Atlantis, which is a new film series, and we're at the contract stage now. So that's a bit premature, but we've gone through 6 different stages of preparation for that. So, and the Psychic Archaeologist has been pitched with National Geographic. We don't know if that's going to go through or not, but so a couple more film projects and some more speaking engagements, and the Magic Egypt trip.
Okay, and let's just spend the last little bit we have. That trip, are there still spots available for it?
There are. I've got 65 people, and I've got room for 100. So I think the bigger the better. I'm in a deep let go for who comes, but there's definitely room. There's a tremendous amount of excitement, and there's an opportunity that won't happen again. And
that's scheduled for December 21st?
8th to 22nd. And then there's an add-on where we go desert camping to the Crystal Mountain, and where there's 43-million-year-old petrified coral. So 3 days in the desert, and it's the 5 honoring a feast day for each of the 5 gods and goddesses, Isis, Osiris, like that. And that's they had a 360-day calendar, and then they did 5 days of festival, and we're honoring that. So that's the 22nd to the 26th, which is an add-on if people don't want to come home for Christmas. And it's all on my website. All the details are there.
Which
and
is
you can email me if you need questions.
pyramidcode.com. And you can see pictures of the fake archaeological site. I can't believe that was fake.
We were kind of surprised, too.
Or, not fake, but man-made.
Yep.
Recent man-made. Carmen, always a pleasure having you on. I'm glad that we really didn't have too much of a script and just went with it because you're fun.
We covered a lot of ground.
So, one last quick question. When does the new book with William Henry due out?
Well, he got sidelined doing another book that seemed urgent to him, so we postponed it. I hope by the end of the year.
Okay, well, you definitely have to come back on, you know that, to talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Carmen. Thank you, and I will talk to you again soon. Next week, we have David Weatherly talking about the Black-Eyed Children, and Philip Coppin is coming on to talk about the enigma of ancient civilizations. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Thanks for listening, and be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise